One of the greatest rivalries in sports is the one between South America and Europe in FIFA World Cup soccer. Before the 2026 World Cup, 22 World Cup soccer tournaments have been held, with 12 being won by Europe and 10 by South America. Germany and Italy share the top honors in Europe with 4 titles each, while Brazil is the top South American nation with 5 titles. Argentina and Uruguay are the only other nations in South America to win the World Cup title. And France, England and Spain are the only other nations in Europe to win the Soccer World Cup. No team from Africa, Asia, North America or Oceania has ever won the World Cup. Hi, you're listening to The Why in History. I am Ajay Kaul, and today we continue our quest into the history of soccer from 1950 onwards. The 1954 World Cup was held in Switzerland, and it adopted a format which is mostly followed even to this day. 16 teams split into 4 groups of 4 each, with the top 2 in each group qualifying for the quarterfinals. In 1954, though, all the 4 teams within the group did not face each other. The top 2 seeded teams faced the other 2, which means the 2 seeded teams never played each other in the group. During the 1958 World Cup, this rule was changed, and all the 4 teams within the group were required to play each other. The 1954 World Cup saw the ban on Germany lifted, and West Germany ended up participating and winning the tournament. One of the most intense games of the 1954 World Cup was the quarterfinal encounter between Hungary and Brazil. Hungary, the most dominant European team in the world at that time, versus Brazil, the most dominant South American team. Hungary took an early 2-0 lead, but as the match progressed, it devolved into a chaotic physical battle. In the second half, English referee Arthur Ellis awarded a controversial penalty to Hungary, and this sparked a pitch invasion by Brazilian journalists, officials, and coaching staff. The referee had to send off 3 players due to violent conduct, 2 Brazilians and 1 Hungarian. And 2 of these were dismissed for engaging in a fist fight in the middle. Hungary won the game 4-2, but the hostility did not end with the final whistle. Brazilian players stormed the Hungarian dressing room, prompting a massive locker room riot. This match was termed the Battle of Bern. Bern meaning the capital of Switzerland. Hungary entered the finals as the hot favorites, and once again took an early 2-0 lead. But the underrated Germans bounced back and defeated Hungary 3-2. And as a result, the final ended up being termed the Miracle of Bern. Later, there were accusations of the German players using dope during the finals, and subsequent witness testimonies and investigations confirmed these accusations to be true. Around the same time as the 1954 World Cup was going on, in close vicinity, in Basel, Switzerland, on June 15, 1954, the Union of European Football Associations, or UEFA, was officially founded. And as the name suggests, UEFA was primarily formed to unite Europe's national football associations into a single cohesive movement to develop, govern, and promote the sport of soccer across Europe. However, on December 13, 1954, English League champions Wolverhampton Wanderers defeated Hungary's famed Budapest Honvéd 3-2 in a friendly encounter. The British press went into overdrive with this victory and proclaimed the Wolverhampton Wanderers the champions of the world. Sports journalists at the French newspaper L'Equipe did not like this assertion, and they counter-argued that the Wolverhampton Wanderers could not call themselves best in the world until they played formidable giants like Real Madrid in Spain or AC Milan in Italy. A few days later, in December 1954, these journalists outlined a comprehensive blueprint of a floodlit knockout tournament where the official champions of every European nation could play each other to crown a true king of the continent. And subsequently, L'Equipe invited representatives from major clubs across Europe to Paris in April of 1955 to approve this framework. So essentially, a French newspaper was preparing to host the European Cup. FIFA was absolutely alarmed at this development. Why? Because they were concerned that a major continental tournament operating as a private venture would create sort of a rogue league which would completely fracture the official structure of world soccer. So in May of 1955, FIFA officially decreed that it would only authorize the European Cup on the strict condition that it be organized and governed by UEFA. UEFA reluctantly agreed to take over the administration of the tournament. There were two conditions set by UEFA. One, the tournament had to receive formal consent of each country's official national association. And two, moving forward, entry had to be strictly merit-based. That is, entry into the tournament would be restricted primarily to the actual reigning domestic champions of each country. L'Equipe's original blueprint had preferred teams with huge fan bases and flooded stadiums instead of a championship title. Interestingly, the journalists at L'Equipe welcomed the European Cup takeover by UEFA. Subsequently, on June 13, 1956, Spain's Real Madrid won the inaugural European Cup tournament, defeating the French club Stade de Reims 4-3. The European Cup, though, is held annually, as opposed to the FIFA World Cup, which is held every 4 years. The 1958 FIFA World Cup was held in Sweden, which once again caused some grief because the tournament was being held back-to-back in Europe. But in 1958, FIFA formally announced that the World Cup would now alternate between continents. Hungary, which had dominated European soccer for a long time, was a depleted side in 1958. Why? Because of the Hungarian Revolution, which had occurred in 1956, which had led to several players leaving Hungary and seeking refuge elsewhere. It was also in 1958 that the group stage evolved into what it is today. That is, each team playing every other team in the group. The 1958 tournament saw the emergence of soccer's first superstar. I'm talking about Brazil's Edson Arantes de Nascimento, also known as Pelé. Interestingly, Pelé, who was only 17 at the time, got a chance to play for Brazil only in their second game after the first game against England ended in a draw. And at the age of 17, he became the youngest to win the World Cup for his country, and in the process, the youngest to score a goal in the final. And this record stands unbroken so far. Brazil beat Sweden 5-2 to lift the Jules Rimet Cup for the first time. And Pelé's goal is still considered among the most spectacular ones in FIFA World Cup history. The 1962 World Cup tournament was hosted by South American nation Chile. Argentina was the first choice, but because of political instability in Argentina, Chile was the next choice. The 1962 tournament was the first in which you did not need to win during the group stage. A draw was okay, and teams within the group would proceed to the knockout stage based on the goal difference. Pelé suffered a severe groin and thigh muscle injury during the second group stage match against Czechoslovakia. As a result, he was forced to sit out for the remainder of the tournament. Brazil still went on to win the tournament, beating Czechoslovakia 3-1 in the final. And Brazil's star of this tournament was Manuel Francisco dos Santos, also known as Garrincha. The 1962 tournament is often remembered for the most brutal game of the FIFA World Cup tournament. I'm talking about a group stage match between Italy and Chile, which is often called the Battle of Santiago. The battle actually started off the field with Italian press making some derogatory comments about Chile, which included the phones don't work, taxis are as rare as faithful husbands, and that the decision to host the World Cup in Chile was pure madness. This triggered aggressive play on the field, a chaotic game which featured spitting, punches, and even police intervention before Chile won 2-0. In fact, Italy's Giorgio Ferrini refused to leave the field after being ejected by the referee, and the police had to be called to escort him off the field. Brazil went on to win the tournament, beating Czechoslovakia 3-1 in the final, and in the process emulated Italy's feat of winning the tournament back-to-back. England finally got a chance to host the World Cup in 1966. Africa collectively boycotted this World Cup in protest against unfair treatment to African nations. In fact, up to 1966, FIFA's qualification rules forced teams from Africa, Asia, and Oceania to compete in a single playoff for just one combined spot in the tournament. And this, the African nations deemed, was totally unfair. North Korea qualified for the first time and had a pretty stellar tournament. Slow motion replays were introduced for the first time for viewers watching live on television, and drug tests were also put into practice for the first time in FIFA World Cup. A lot of the teams had realized by now that they could neutralize Brazil by injuring Pelé via unjust tackles. And that strategy worked. Brazil was kicked out in the group stage itself with Pelé half injured. In fact, Pelé was so frustrated that he announced his retirement at the end of the tournament. He, however, changed his mind 2 years later and came back to participate in the 1970 World Cup. England had fielded a dream team with players like Gordon Banks, Bobby Charlton, and Geoff Hurst. And Portugal too were riding high on the back of their successful striker, Eusebio. In fact, the quarterfinal match between Portugal and North Korea is often considered one of the most exciting matches in FIFA World Cup history. North Korea shot into the lead very early, and by the 26th minute, were leading 3-0. But Portugal, powered by Eusebio, made a dramatic comeback with Eusebio scoring 4 goals in a row, and Portugal ultimately won 5-3. Portugal went on to take the third spot, and that's the highest spot Portugal has achieved in FIFA World Cup history. To allow the working fans to watch the World Cup live, a lot of the matches in FIFA 1966 were played under floodlights. The final, though, was played during daylight hours, and it turned out to be one of the most controversial finals in FIFA World Cup history. England and West Germany were locked 2-2, and the match had moved into extra time when England scored what is often termed the ghost goal. England's Geoff Hurst hit a shot that bounced off of the crossbar and appeared to land just over the goal line before being cleared. The referee consulted his linesman, who signaled that it was a goal. But decades of film analysis and computer simulations have cast doubt on whether the entire ball actually crossed the line. But this was not it. In the dying minutes, with England leading 3-2, there was a pitch invasion where the English fans ran into the pitch to celebrate, and in the melee, England scored their 4th goal, giving them a 4-2 win. The 1966 African boycott did have an impact on FIFA, and it led to Africa getting its own guaranteed automatic spot in 1970. Morocco became the first African team to qualify for the 1970 FIFA World Cup via this route. Mexico was chosen to host the 1970 World Cup, and there were two major updates to rules that were introduced in this World Cup. The first was to allow players to be substituted during the course of a match. The teams were allowed exactly 2 substitutions per game, and the first substitute in FIFA World Cup history ended up being Anatoly Puzak of the Soviet Union in their opening game against Mexico in the 1970 World Cup. The second rule update was the introduction of yellow and red cards to indicate warnings and ejections during the course of a match. Warnings and ejections existed before 1970, but they were verbal in nature and created a lot of confusion. A huge language barrier existed between the referees and the players because each spoke a different language, and this often created confusion, with players often not understanding that they were being asked to leave the field. 2 incidents occurred in the 1966 World Cup that necessitated the need for an alternate system to indicate a warning or an ejection. During the 1966 World Cup quarterfinal between England and Argentina, the German referee Rudolf Kreitlin decided to send off Argentinian captain Antonio Rattin for constant arguing. Rattin did not speak German, and the referee did not speak Spanish, so Rattin refused to leave the pitch, demanding an interpreter. And this delayed the match by 8 minutes until the police and the officials intervened. However, there was another more amusing incident in the same match. English players Bobby and Jack Charlton discovered that they had been formally cautioned by the referee a day later after reading the official reports in the newspaper the next day. So English referee Ken Aston, while stopping at a traffic light, suddenly had an idea. The same color that motorists were using the world over to stop or proceed with caution could be used in the football field. So the yellow card was conceived to indicate a warning and the red card to indicate a dismissal. Aston's wife Hilda created the pocket-sized red and yellow cards from construction paper, and these were introduced in the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. 1970 was also the first World Cup soccer tournament to be telecast in color. The final was between Brazil and Italy, and both the teams were vying to win the cup a record 3rd time. But with Pelé in full form, this Brazilian team is often considered one of the finest fielded by Brazil in a World Cup tournament. Brazil beat Italy 4-1 to lift the cup for the 3rd time. And as per the FIFA rules, the Jules Rimet Trophy was theirs to keep. In the process, Brazil also set a record, becoming the 2nd country in the history of the FIFA World Cup to win all their matches in regular time. Uruguay was the first to achieve this feat in 1930. But Brazil were unable to hold on to the Jules Rimet Trophy for too long. Wait, what? Yep, on December 19, 1983, the Jules Rimet Trophy was stolen from the headquarters of the Brazilian Football Confederation in Rio de Janeiro. 4 men were eventually convicted for this audacious heist, but the physical trophy was never recovered. It was widely believed that the thieves melted down the trophy for its gold content. FIFA, though, presented Brazil with an official gold-plated replica of the Jules Rimet Trophy. Once the Jules Rimet Trophy was handed over to Brazil permanently, FIFA introduced a brand new solid 18-karat gold trophy designed by Italian sculptor Silvio Gazzaniga. And the first to hold this trophy was the German captain Franz Beckenbauer at the 1974 World Cup. However, per the new FIFA rules, this original FIFA World Cup trophy was returned to FIFA after the celebrations, and the German team received a gold-plated bronze replica to keep permanently. In 1991, the first Women's World Cup soccer tournament was held in China. The United States won the championship, beating Norway 2-1 in the final. In 1992, the back pass rule was introduced, which ruled that goalkeepers could no longer handle the ball when it was deliberately kicked to them by a teammate. And I have lost count of how many goals have been scored by the opposition as a result of the goalkeeper fumbling the back pass. The 2018 World Cup in Russia saw the introduction of technology via the video assistant referee or the VAR system to help referees overturn clear and obvious errors regarding goals, penalties, red cards, and mistaken identity. Though the number of substitutions has evolved over time, the 2026 World Cup will see a major change in the substitution rule. Just like in 2022, 5 standard substitutions will be allowed per match and a 6th in extra time. But substituted players will have a maximum of 10 seconds to completely exit the pitch from the moment the official raises the board. And they must exit via the nearest boundary line. And if the player takes more than 10 seconds to exit, the incoming player will not be allowed to enter the pitch immediately. They must wait on the sideline for exactly 1 minute of playing time until the next official stoppage, which means the offending team is forced to play one man down during that entire minute. And on that note, we end this section of the program. On to the quiz section. Question from the previous episode. Including the 2026 World Cup soccer tournament, which is the first and the only country so far to host the competition thrice. Mexico hosted the World Cup soccer tournament in 1970 and 1986 and will be co-hosting in 2026 with the United States and Canada. So the answer is D, Mexico. Question for the current episode. Who's the only player in history to score a goal for his team and the opposition in a FIFA World Cup final? Is it A, England's Geoff Hurst in the England vs West Germany 1966 final? B, Croatia's Mario Mandzukic in the Croatia vs France 2018 final? C, Italy's Alessandro Altobelli in the Italy vs West Germany 1982 final? Or D, France's Kylian Mbappe in the Argentina vs France 2022 final? Once again, only one player in history has scored a goal for his team and the opposition in a FIFA World Cup final. Is it A, England's Geoff Hurst in the England vs West Germany 1966 final? B, Croatia's Mario Mandzukic in the Croatia vs France 2018 final? C, Italy's Alessandro Altobelli in the Italy vs West Germany 1982 final? Or D, France's Kylian Mbappe in the Argentina vs France 2022 final? The answer will be provided in the next episode. That's all we have in today's episode. Hope you enjoyed it and will tune in again in 2 weeks to listen to another interesting and exciting episode on world history. Till then, stay safe and keep exploring the why in history.